Doug. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Welcome, Douglas Alexander. Doug is the director of the Institute for Cybersecurity and Emerging Technologies at Rhode Island College. He leads efforts to advance cybersecurity education, workforce development, and emerging technologies across the state. Thanks for joining us, Doug.
Thank you for having me.
Can you start by broadly defining cybersecurity?
Oh, you start with an easy question.
Very
Um,
easy.
I've been thinking a lot about this lately because the word is sort of off-putting for a lot of folks who aren't familiar with our world, and it ends up being a bit of a gatekeeping, jargony term. And I think really what cybersecurity has become is business security, right? Traditionally, if you think about people trying to steal data, it was about breaking into a building, right? Finding a file cabinet. Think about all the old spy movies. And now you don't have to do that anymore because information is not stored in filing cabinets. It's stored in computers or in the cloud or in data centers. And it it, it is your business IP. It is your crown jewels. So you use cybersecurity to protect that, but really what you're doing is protecting your entire business. And you're doing that with physical perimeters, you're doing that with identity, you're doing that with important documentation or network devices or OT, factory devices. So really, I think cybersecurity increasingly is just defined as organizational security or personal data privacy.
Tell me about your work at the Institute. What does your work focus on there?
So the mission of the Institute is to provide workforce development and education to try and plug the holes in the cybersecurity uh, industry as far as all the open jobs that are out there and all the missing skills that organizations need to really stay secure. It's a rapidly evolving landscape of security, and it requires people who have been trained in the latest threats and the latest tools to help keep a business safe, large or small. And so our primary goal is to produce students out of Rhode Island College um, to meet those workforce demands, but also to reach out to the community and educate and upskill workers around Rhode Island and the region. So we may be at Rhode Island College, but we are not just for Rhode Island College. We are for the state and the region as a whole as a resource to help fill those workforce holes. And then we're also community building. So we've been doing a lot of events, a lot of outreach, a very successful series of cybersecurity professional meetups that has been attracting folks from all around New England. And we've been partnering with various organizations, state and nonprofits to have events around cybersecurity for their particular niche, whether it's manufacturers or small businesses. So we're really excited about being able to just support the community in all of those endeavors. And we've also been advising state government. Congressman Langevin is the founder of this institute. He, of course, was big in cybersecurity when he was in Congress, Jim Langevin. He retired from Congress and started this. And so our political ties are fairly rich and deep as well. And we have been working with the governor's AI task force, Congressman Langevin chairs that, to try and set a course for the state and many different industries on how to responsibly use AI. And also we've been advising some Rhode Island state committees on cybersecurity and AI in policy and in legislation. So those are really our three main areas: workforce, community, and policy and legislation guidance.
Can you tell me about some of the specific programs you have for students? Also, do you work with students who are not enrolled at RIC? Do you work with high school students? And I know you work with others who are not students. What are some of the programs you have available?
So at the core, Rhode Island College's program is a cybersecurity major, a BS in cybersecurity, and a cybersecurity minor. Those have been going for a few years now. We have about 100 students enrolled here on campus. We just this fall launched an AI major and AI and applied AI minor. So we do a lot with computer science and data analytics and data science
Mhm.
in those programs, obviously. The entire institute is situated within the School of Business here. So we like to say we're one of the only business-focused cybersecurity degrees
Mhm.
in the region, in that we're really targeting producing students who are graduates who are workforce ready in cyber or AI. So that's a small picture of our program here. But outside of that, we're also building a cyber range, which is going to be used for the academic program as well as for the community upskilling. community workforce development, where we're going to have the special simulation space. I'm gesturing because it's right next door to my office here. In partnership with IBM, we're using their cyber campus suite of tools and platforms to build this simulation space so that we can get real hands-on learning, real experiential learning with our cybersecurity tools. And we say simulations, they're real cyber attacks, right? This is the real malware being delivered in a sandboxed network. So we're excited to bring that online in June and start really using that for both for students in our program and also for community partners who want to come in and actually, go beyond tabletops and really experience an attack.
Very nice. So one of my questions was actually, what is a cyber range classroom? Can you describe it? And also, what types of simulations does it provide for the students?
Yeah, so a lot of this language comes out of military training contexts, right? So they have a firing range or they'll have live fire exercises, right? And so we're trying to demilitarize this a little bit because on college campus saying live fire exercises doesn't always make people feel comfy. So we're calling it a cybersecurity training facility, training center, and we're saying we're going to deliver live malware exercises. And the whole point is the analogy is that in cybersecurity, experiencing a real attack in a real business production environment is hard to train on, but also traumatic and intense and pressure filled, and requires a lot of specialized skills to handle properly. And a lot of workers, while they may have been adjacent to a cyber attack, haven't really, even in cybersecurity, haven't had the opportunity to properly defend against and mitigate an attack. So we are building this facility, and really the software exists in the cloud, but there's also a physical classroom. And the idea is to provide this sort of immersive experience where participants, whether they're students or cybersecurity professionals, can come in and sit down and be a SOC analyst, security operations center analyst, and take on a specific role on a team and defend against real malware. So that's really what the cyber range is, analogous to a firing range where you're using real weapons, right? There's even IBM even has signs saying, warning, live malware in use on their internal ranges. Because it is a little risky, right? If you're working with these files, if someone does the wrong thing with them and copies them to the wrong place, you could end up actually infecting your network. So it's as real as it can get while being still low stakes.
Yeah. So are you in like a sandbox environment? So let's say, this is a student exercise, right? So you set up the scenario, you're going to be handling some type of malware today. I don't know how much information you even give to the students. It starts, and then let's say students make a huge mistake. Does it really infect the overall network? Are you in some kind of sandbox environment that kind of protects the kind of overall network?
Right. No, so the platform that we're using is called Cloud Range Cyber, and it is a third-party provider that explicitly provides this service in conjunction. So we're buying it in conjunction with IBM's Cyber Campus. And so what they have is they have a virtual network in the cloud that is sandboxed, and it is a network of virtual machines that is built to simulate a real life network. It's got a couple of firewalls, a DMZ, an internet segment. It's got operational servers, DNS, DHCP, Active Directory, but then it's also got user machines and servers, right? Database servers and IIS servers and things like that. So it tries to replicate a network environment enough, and then using Metasploit, they build scenarios that script the actual attack, right? From we're putting in stolen credentials, we're trying to brute force, or we've got a set of credentials, to now we're injecting malware, now we're using Mimikatz, now we're using Cobalt Strike, now we're using just living off the land tools to move laterally inside of a network and find the crown jewels and either encrypt it or just deface a website or whatever the indicator of compromise is. And that's what we give to students. It takes a little while because these attacks can be elaborate. So you start up the range network and then you run the scenario, and that can take anywhere from 15 to 45 minutes, depending on how elaborate it is. And then we say to them, okay, your user's logged into a computer and they got a note saying that everything's been encrypted. Go. And the idea is for them to fail gracefully, right? Fail safely, whether it's a student team learning how to follow the breadcrumb trail, or it's a professional team that's got their incident response plan and they're trying to run it and see if it gets them where they need to be, but also to see how their team dynamics work, right? Because you can have a plan, but if people aren't uh, being good team players, if your firewall guy is not talking to your network admin, you've got a breakdown in your team response.
Yeah.
So the point of the exercise isn't just do you have the technical skills, right? Obviously, that's one thing that you want to evaluate and give feedback on. The point is to review sort of holistically, how did your team do? How did you communicate? How did you fulfill your roles? How did you share information?
Hmm.
When it got tense, the whole idea is for it to feel tense. It's supposed to be as realistic as possible, so that we're trying to stress them out basically, and then see how they respond under pressure. So it's the holistic experience for a corporate team, for a partner team would be, here's how you did technically, but also here's how you did in a team dynamic sense. And here's where we evaluate your strengths and weaknesses across all of those things and give this back to your management and say, here are some skills you need to improve. We have labs for that. We have
Hmm.
labs for these tools. We have labs for these techniques. But also, here's our analysis of your team dynamics and where we think things were breaking down or where we think things were working really, really well, right? Where you guys were firing on all cylinders. And the goal is to keep doing it until your plan is bulletproof and your team is tight and experienced, so that when it does actually happen to you, you don't have to work through all of those issues.
For students who participate in this, is this tied to coursework or is this purely experiential learning? Like, will there be a grade associated with this at any point?
We're just in the beginning of it, really incorporating a lot of this into our curriculum. So
Mhm.
we haven't yet, we've run one live fire, what we're calling live malware exercises with our students. But we are using the lab environment. So there's two main portions. One is that live environment with the virtual network and the attacks, and one is uh, an LMS that has 1,500 plus challenge labs, training labs, and skills assessments. And we're using a lot of the training labs in some of our cybersecurity classes already. And we've mapped a bunch of them to a number of different courses. And then next fall is when we really plan to roll out not only those labs, but also where appropriate, where the students are ready for it, some of these live exercises as part of their team experience. It's a bit challenging because they're 4 to 6 hour experiences done
Mhm.
fully. So we are literally in the middle of training on how do we adjust that to be 2.5 hours? What do we cut out before and after, or how do we prepare them more so that when they come in, they're ready to hit the ground running with an attack? And how does this all play out as far as evaluation and grading? The labs are graded, but the live fires, we're going to have to put together some rubrics on just what is it we're looking for? What does good performance look like in this context? And I imagine it's going to be a lot around executing on the skills and the tools that you've been learning in class, leading up to that. So that's the plan. There are a few other schools in the nation doing this. We're all trying to meet and talk because we're all grappling with this same challenge of, okay, now how do we take this experiential learning and really integrate it into our existing curriculum or build entirely new courses? There's RIT has a range actually up in Rochester, and they have a whole course, a cyber defense course for I think it's for their seniors and juniors, where the classroom is their range, right? They run red team, blue team simulations using the range um, as their class, and that's a goal for me, is to have a class like that.
Yeah, I can imagine this would be super attractive to faculty who are teaching this. They could, send students to the lab for a simulation, some type of exercise, and that is their assignment for the week or whatever that looks like. And I could see how that would be really amazing for students to have it integrated with coursework.
I think students will love it once they really understand it and get their hands on it. We have a couple of interns who've gotten a sneak peek at it, as we're learning the scenarios and learning how to operate the whole environment. Um, the professors are going to take a little bit of training to really understand fully how to work it in, because it is quite different. We're just at the onset of this kind of hands-on learning for cyber in a higher ed setting. Like I said, IBM is rolling this out. I know Massachusetts has a program where they're building several cyber ranges inside of university and community college campuses. So it's going to evolve significantly over the next few years.
What are the biggest gaps in cybersecurity education today? And how does your program or programs address this?
So I think really a lot of it is this hands-on, right? This you can you can do book learning that gets you to certifications where you take a test and you say, yes, I know these terms, I know what this
Right.
means, I understand this concept. But that is a far cry from actually sitting down with a suite of tools, not just a single tool, but a suite of tools and saying, I know how to use these in concert, right? And I understand, even if I'm not a seasoned cybersecurity professional, because I'm a college student, I understand how these work together and how to sequentially use them to what I call follow the breadcrumb trail of an attack and really get to the root of it and root out an attacker and mitigate whatever damage they did to the systems. It's partly also why we do this. You want to do this with corporate partners is that they might have tabletop exercises. They've done this on paper, right? They've talked through their plan, but have they really sat down and used the tools in an attack scenario? And that's something that you can't necessarily plan for or do in your normal work environment. And it's certainly not something they've been able to do up till now in a curriculum environment. They spin up Kali Linux and they can use the tools in exercises, but it's not the same as saying, I've got a whole network in front of me and there's a malware attack going on. What do I do? They're thinking of our graduates as sort of super IT help desk students, and they'll train them in cyber. And we're trying to shift that to say, no, 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 we're going to have graduates who are coming out with real hands-on cyber experience. They may not be a seasoned cyber analyst, but they're ready to sit at a desk and do rookie cybersecurity analyst work and not have to come up through the ranks of IT the way a lot of us middle-aged guys did who didn't have cybersecurity as a major
Right.
when we were in school.
What specific skills or certifications should students prioritize who are working in these labs, who are, in the cybersecurity major or the minor? What should they prioritize?
So it really depends on what career path you want to follow in cyber. I think what a lot of folks don't understand is that cyber is not a monolithic career, right? Not everybody starts just as a cybersecurity analyst, and not everybody ends up as a super threat, a malware disassembler or a threat hunter. There are lots and lots of different kinds of careers in cyber. So you could go at it from the governance and compliance angle, where you're not really doing technical hands-on, but you really need to understand policy and you really need to understand how to close the gap between just having it on paper, or is the organization actually following these policies? Are we properly locked down? Does everybody exhibit the behaviors and the habits that we need to be secure as an organization? The question was, what are the certifications? So there are the paper certifications. We're a CompTIA site. We are helping our students get to A+, Net+, or Security Plus certifications, which are important first steps that employers look for, but they don't solve the problem of, okay, great, you graduated with a Security Plus or even a Pen Test Plus, but you haven't done this in real time. So we're gonna regard you as you're not Security Operations Center ready just yet. You need some seasoning in just doing IT support. And so I think the gaps are with the hands-on and with the actually using the tools. It's just not enough to say, I've got this cert, unless the cert is really like a certified ethical hacker kind of cert, which is difficult to get when you're just coming out of college. It requires a good deal of effort and a good deal of knowledge. So I think another thing to focus on, and one thing I tell a lot of students is just read a lot and explore a lot and do things like try Hack Me or Hack the Box or other educational platforms. There's so many more resources now than there were even a few years ago. And it's frustrating and it requires a lot of self-starting, but it's also, that's what learning feels like, right? Learning is frustration. If you're experiencing that feeling, you are learning, you're learning something. And hopefully you're learning something productive and useful for your future job. So it's a mix of hit those marks that you want, that employers are looking for, that sort of are shorthand for, okay, you know something about something, but also, don't be afraid to like cobble together a home lab or get a subscription to Hack the Box and really start digging into concrete skills and competencies that they're going to ask you about in an interview, or that a supervisor is going to be pleased that when you get on their job
So how do you know what employers are looking for? Is it because you have corporate partners and they come to you with specific scenarios that they want to test? Is that a great way to get a sense of what companies are actually looking for?
So part of my job, I've been here almost a year now as the director of this institute. I'm the first director that we're just getting started. It's our second year.
Hmm?
Um, is business development, right? Forming these relationships with the companies, large and small, um, to understand exactly that question. What are you looking for? What do you want? How can we help you? We're here. We're not here to produce the platonic ideal of a cybersecurity graduate. We're here to produce what employers are looking for so
Right.
that our students can get good paying jobs. Um, and so I've met a bunch of different folks. In fact, our meetups have everyone from students up to senior CISOs and executives coming to them. And it's a really great mix because we get to hear about the challenges in particular shops and particular industries. And we have companies come in and do presentations to students as well. We call them Monday Mingles and Tuesday Tangos, where it's a way for Citizens Bank or Fidelity, or the other day we had somebody who was a social engineer and a physical pen tester come in and present to the kids and take questions about their jobs and what they do and
Oh,
how they got there, right? Because still in cyber, a lot of folks like me who are not just out of college came at it sidelong, right? There's a bunch of different avenues into it. Whereas now we're saying to these students, you can go directly into it, um,
right.
given the right given the right resume. So I I advise them to get used to reading and get used to being frustrated and get used to not knowing what's going on for a while because there's just so much to know. And if you can find a mentor, but if you can't, find a platform or two that really shepherds you along and helps you dig in to specific hands-on tools.
This is a good segue. Tell me how you got here. What's your journey
Mhm.
been into cybersecurity?
I was that kid in my family who, whenever we got a new gadget, my parents would toss me the manual and say, figure this out, right? And at that point, it was like a VCR
Yeah.
or a camcorder or something that had a lot of buttons and modes and wasn't immediately intuitive how to use it. I don't know why I was like that. I just know that I was. I needed to understand these gadgets. Um, and then when we got our first computer, we got an Apple IIc, I think in 1985. I just, I was just a pig in mud. I was learning basic. I was writing programs. I would play games as things progressed. And there was, dial up. I would dial up to bulletin boards in Rochester, New York, and download software. And I remember I did a prospective weekend at a campus that had a tremendous network, really very modern. I never went to a class. I spent the entire time in my host's room downloading software from their network and putting it onto floppy disks to bring home. I just always gravitated to technology. And so when I went to college, I majored in psychology, but I did my thesis in computer anxiety and computer use. And I used the Next computer platform, which my college had a basement full of Next workstations as a novel environment to test how people reacted to different scenarios. And and then from there, I went into consulting and I was a management consultant on software projects where I learned a lot about software development and training. I wasn't a developer, I was in training and change management. Um, and then I went into systems engineering at Xerox, and then I went into tech direction in K-12, and I became a teacher and a tech coordinator. Um, and I eventually worked my way through. I had a brief stint in working in an ISP, doing network and support, member support for nonprofits all across the state. And all of that. And oh, and by the way, while I was a K-12 tech director, I got my CISSP because I thought I really need to learn more about this cyber stuff.
Mhm.
I know the tech as a generalist pretty well, but I really should bone up on cyber because this is becoming an important part of this position. This is back in 2017, 18. Um, and not knowing that this was supposed to be a hard cert and that it was supposed to be for people who've been working in cyber for several years, I just bought all the books and studied and did flashcards and took the exam and somehow passed it. So suddenly I was a CISSP without really having worked as a cybersecurity professional
Right.
outside of a school tech director. But when this position came up, it kind of had all the pieces, right? It had administration, it had sales, business development, and had education and curriculum development and technology. And it was creative. This is the first job that I've really been able to flex my creative muscles and say, we're building something. Every day we're making something up. And it's the best job I've ever had because I love that feeling, as anxiety provoking as it can be, to be like, I'm not really sure where this is going, but we're going to figure it out. That's been really fun.
That's interesting. So what are the most common or biggest cybersecurity threats facing businesses and institutions today?
I like to say that we've gotten here because what we're using as platforms for our computing is just riddled with bugs. So I think one of the common problems is that there's a never-ending stream of vulnerabilities that keep getting unearthed, or that have been unearthed but haven't been patched in the wild. And it's frustrating because it's not entirely clear that it's possible to create a bug-free system, but you also get the sense that a lot of these developers aren't prioritizing that, and they should be. The CISA has had a secure by design program that really pushes the responsibility back on developers to say, look, it's on you to create a QA and a regression testing and a security testing process, and have secure operational development principles so you put out software that isn't full of CVEs from day one. And I'm looking at you, Microsoft, Windows, and Mac OS, and Cisco, and all of the massive platforms out there that are constantly announcing CVEs, and then you have to pass them on. And so it is kind of why I have a job, but it also is kind of frustrating. Like, can't we solve this problem of nothing we use is secure? But I think the larger problem is that we've created such a complex system of systems, right? That's what the internet is. It's a network of networks, and networks are systems of systems. And then there are humans in the mix as well, that it creates a real a pool of chaotic behavior and chaotic interactions and emergent behaviors and systems that is just a target-rich environment for attackers to come into. I read something the other day where it says, humans are always the weakest link in any network. And it's like, yes, but isn't there a certain responsibility to develop systems and policies and practices to protect them from themselves? Like, don't blame them for the shortcomings of your network, right? If they click on a phishing link and it infects the entire network, well, is that really their fault entirely? Like, why doesn't your network detect that was a phishing link and stop it before it can really spread? So I think part of the problem is, and this is a really simple problem, is you have to lock down every single hole, and the attacker only has to find one vulnerability, one way in. So I always say it's like trying to put shellac on a screen door, right? Have you gotten every single hole in that screen door? Are you sure that no water can get through that? That's not an easy thing to do without really spending time and effort. And I think that's a big part of the problem, is that it takes more resources, economically speaking, than businesses are willing to spend. Certainly that municipalities and cities and nonprofits are willing to spend to properly lock down a functioning network, and not rely on policies that regulate behavior and not technology. Because try to regulate human behavior, try to tell everybody always do this thing regardless. That's not a human strength.
So how does AI change all of this, both in terms of the offensive cyber attacks and defensive security measures?
Yeah, I don't think it's entirely clear yet, but we know that it is changing things, and you can't responsibly talk about cybersecurity without talking about AI as well. And the truth of the matter is, AI in an analytical, predictive sense has been around for quite a while, right? The emergence of ChatGPT in 2022 kind of brought AI to the popular imagination, but that's LLMs, right? Prior to that, we've been living with AI for quite some time, and what it really is massively advanced pattern recognition and adaptability. And on the defensive side, massively advanced pattern recognition is super attractive, because pattern recognition is a lot of what defending a network is, right? Looking for anomalous behavior, looking for
Right.
anomalous patterns in the fire hose of legitimate traffic, whether it's going in and out of your network or whether it's internal to your network. You're looking to find that needle in a haystack, or that series of actions that doesn't belong.
Mhm.
So in that sense, AI is super powerful, and and in a deep learning sense, I think AI can really be powerful because it's not meant to deploy against all the threats. You're looking at specific domains of threats, and you can really do a deep dive into those patterns
Mhm.
and uh, and produce some powerful results, because that's not a human brain job, right? I've always thought, I think VR would be an interesting intersection with cyber, because you could actually visualize this traffic and try and pull out what doesn't belong.
Right.
But imagine looking at a 10 gig connection of a massive corporation and trying to make sense of that. Like it's like reading the Matrix. You need tools to support you in that visualization. And I think that's what AI offers us, um, in a really exciting way in the defensive space.
Yeah.
The problem is that the attackers have access to the same technology, right? They can build their own AI enabled tools.
Well, that's what I'm
Where I
thinking.
worry about that is a lot of,
I'm thinking
right,
like
go ahead.
the AI is creating the traffic. Recent developments in AI are creating the traffic, and you're using AI to monitor the same traffic.
It becomes a drone versus drone kind of situation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because yeah, if I were an attacker, I would think AI would be useful for flooding the zone, right? Flooding it with what legitimate looking traffic, and then
Right.
hiding the malicious traffic within that. You can create endless, I think slop is the term of art right now. You could create offensive slop that over the not necessarily a DDoS attack, because you don't necessarily want to tip them off. You just want to hide within the crowd.
Yeah.
Um, but also I think around shape-shifting sort of morphing behavior, right? A lot of AI is signature detection or pattern recognition, or understanding that a tool looks a certain way or leaves a certain footprint, and or you're looking for malicious code markers in apps that are being injected, or code that's being injected into your network.
Mhm.
If you can use AI to obfuscate that code or obfuscate those patterns, which
Right.
they do, right? Um, and you can also use encryption for that, but encryption can be expensive and complicated to develop with. If you could just use AI and say, I've just generated 6 different versions of this, or 1,100 different versions of this malware, all of which do the same thing, but no two of which leave the same signature and the same footprint,
Right.
because I've varied them at a scale that a human really couldn't do, but that an LLM doesn't breathe hard. Um, that's super powerful
Yeah.
as well. And so now you've got the cat and mouse game of, right, what are the new indicators of compromise? What are the new signs of infection that I need to use my tools, perhaps AI enabled tools, to
Right.
look for when I'm monitoring? Um, I'm sure there's other uses for it as well. And I think as the attackers become more sophisticated and develop the skills, they're obviously very skilled at writing malware and droppers and um, um, rootkits and things like that. But if AI becomes entangled in there in a skilled way, it could be pretty rough.
What are some of the more recent advancements in cybersecurity that excite you? And maybe it's what we're already talking about. AI enabled monitoring, different ways of using AI to monitor traffic. Are there specific advancements?
I think, I mean, obviously, yes, tools get better all the time, and the
Yeah.
and the availability of just enormous amounts of compute and storage really help with um, analysis and patterns and uh, decryption and things like that. But I think the most exciting things are using that to stitch together more threat intelligence, and to be able to really high level monitor all aspects of a network, right? There are tools now that can go out and scan, like I've talked to healthcare organizations that are really worried about the proliferation of devices on their network, right?
Mhm.
Departments buy this monitor or that thing, and they all hook up to the network now. They all have an IP address. But the IT department doesn't necessarily vet them beforehand, or doesn't have the full coverage. But there are tools that can now do deep scans of networks, and not only identify the devices, but identify how they fit into the overall network, who they're talking to, what their firmware versions are, what their MAC addresses are, who built them, where are their vulnerabilities, when were
Mhm.
they last updated, and and then holistically feed that back into a CrowdStrike or another EDR platform, which then properly associates the devices with policies or isolates them from the network because they're not running the latest firmware or whatever. So there's the combination of that compute, but also that access to data and sharing,
Mhm.
the sharing of data and the integration of systems that I think is really powerful for a big enterprise who is understandably concerned that they've got vulnerabilities they don't even know about
Right.
because they've got such, especially in hospitals, things tend to be very feudal. And certain department doesn't ask before they buy things; they just buy them and then hook them up. And there's not enough review and assessment of how secure that essentially that IoT device is,
Mhm.
right? So I think I was really excited when I learned about those systems because I thought this is really something that could change the game for enterprises. And then the other thing you're seeing a lot, and you just saw Google buy a Wiz, is multi-cloud security management, right? Not really monitoring not just your Azure instance and looking for misconfigurations and looking for
Mhm.
security holes, but being able to have a platform that says, I've got AWS, I've got Azure, I can build tunnels between them, I can build secure tunnels up to them. I can really lock down these environments and give you an overview more of your multi-cloud environment because more and more organizations are not just living in Azure and M365, they might also have AWS workloads or even our cloud environment happens to be in Google Cloud
Mhm.
right now. So I think that's really exciting and I think that's an interesting place to go. And I think cloud security is something we're going to need to focus on more and more in the coming few years because that's obviously an emerging threat area.
Can you talk about a specific cybersecurity breach that you've had to deal with, a real one, and what the solution
Yeah.
was? And if you can't talk about it, can you talk about a breach or case study that fascinates you?
Well, I've got a couple. One's personal and one's more immediate and contextual.
Mhm.
When I was a tech director in one of the larger K-12 school districts here in Rhode Island, which is to say not large at all, but it was large for us.
Mhm.
Uh, we we had a finance person's Google account uh, get compromised, and we only found out about it because the attackers tried to get a bank to send a check to a different location. Um,
Hmm.
and as we unraveled it, come to find out they'd been dwelling in her account for quite a while. They'd been watching her communications, and they had chosen and they had been emailing back and forth to this bank and then covering their tracks the
Mhm.
whole time with rules and deleting things from the sent mail and things like this. So it was an object lesson in and we think they got in because she logged in at home and her home computer was infected with some kind of malware.
Okay.
That was our suspicion. Um, but we did not have at the time, this was 2017, we did not have MFA turned on for Google. We didn't have that second, what I think Google called two-factor authentication.
Yeah.
And immediately that was the answer, was just, we need to turn on for all administrative accounts at the very least, we need to turn on MFA.
Mhm.
And I got surprisingly little pushback about that because I think everybody really understood the sorry, the severity of the threat, right? There could have been tens of thousands of dollars that would have been lost to the
Right.
district. Um, so that was one incident where, and that was really what got me started on the path of like, I should know more about this. This
Mhm.
this this is a problem. I knew what to do. We did the education, we did the MFA, but um, it was the tip of the iceberg. And then the other one is we literally here in Rhode Island just had one of our major healthcare systems that the government has built, the local healthcare exchange got breached by a hacking group that has hacked other state actors, state um, agencies as well. And it was an object lesson in third-party risk management because the whole system was managed by Deloitte. And I'm not saying anything that wasn't in the news here. This isn't uh, private information. This was Deloitte managed this system called RI Bridges, which itself had a rocky start
Yeah.
as UHIP back in the day. And they were not doing the kind of security they said they were going to do, basically. And the attackers quite easily got in and compromised the whole thing. And the only thing that was fortunate is that they managed to stop it before everything was fully encrypted. And but it was after 700,000 Rhode Islanders' data had been exfiltrated and shared on the dark web. So
Oh,
we
okay.
had probably one of the bigger, as a small state, one of the bigger proportionally state hacks because so much citizen PII was lost in that incident. So that was one where the state is still cleaning up and still figuring it out, and there will no doubt be fallout from that in the future. And this is what our Senate just spun up an AI and Emerging Technologies Committee in Rhode Island, and I gave them Cybersecurity 101 at their first hearing because they realized they need to have more oversight into things like this, and there needs to be a little more attention paid to state systems.
Oh, it's crazy. I was going to ask you what happened, but you said the data was shared on the dark web.
Yeah, I think they estimated something like 700,000 citizens' data.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's been found on the dark web yet, but it definitely got exfiltrated and stolen.
Yeah.
They may, and who knows what happens to it from there if it's been sold or resold. But it was a lot. It was more than just names and phone numbers. There were social security numbers. There was bank account information. It was as bad as it gets, and we're really worried about, especially at tax time, a lot of these Rhode Island citizens getting, having their identity stolen. Essentially, is what the risk is.
So we talked a little bit about this. Can you again talk about the cybersecurity tools and platforms you're using regularly in your work at the institute or within the range?
Yeah. So fundamentally, we're an education shop. So we're here to teach and support. So actually, just this morning, you asked about what kind of students that we teach. We host a high school group from a local career and tech center generally, and I do a little fun cybersecurity trivia. Jump right into a training lab on packet captures and analyzing network traffic using SNORT and Wireshark and HexDump, and we give them a little taste to work in Linux, what it's like to work in the onion flavor of Linux that we use, but same idea. And then we teach them how to use the command line to launch these tools and to open up the packet captures and to analyze them. And it's all, from a cybersecurity professional point, it's fairly bread and butter stuff. And so all of those, I mentioned Metasploit before. So Metasploit is an immensely powerful platform that allows you to test vulnerabilities, create scripts, and run exploits against various systems. And in an education environment, obviously you want to do that safely. It's a very powerful tool. Using a SIEM, like a log analyzer, like Splunk. You're using an IDS like Security Onion to analyze the traffic and look for threats and follow the sessions as they happened. Find that breadcrumb trail of what steps the malicious actor took to get in there. And then you're using a lot of tools like RDP just to hop back and forth between servers and understand where the files were compromised and how to restore them and how to get back. And in a more comprehensive advanced exercise, you're probably going to use tools. I mean, obviously you're going to use tools like Nmap to understand how to map networks. But there's a whole what is it called? ZAP. So there's a whole area of web application vulnerabilities, right? And ZAP is a great tool for testing web applications and using the OWASP top 10 list of vulnerabilities to understand what's exploitable in a web application. That's a big piece. And then there's some of our labs teach kids how to use John the Ripper. You actually decrypt passwords. A tool I need to learn more and use more because there's 17 billion sets of credentials that have been leaked in the aggregate. And so tools like John the Ripper can use the statistics you can draw from that repository, that huge treasure trove of passwords, to really be incredibly strong password crackers. And so we were just this morning with a high school group. I like to do this. I give them a quiz question of which of these passwords is more secure, and I give them a string of like 15 random characters, and then I give them a passphrase of 5 longish words, and everybody chooses the random characters. And in fact, the passphrase is the more secure one because it's longer and has more entropy and is harder to crack.
What's your go-to cybersecurity resource for staying informed?
Bleeping Computer is always a really great site for seeing the latest attacks. I get the ARC reading newsletter every day, and I really like looking at that because I get sort of high level looks at what's happening in the world of cybersecurity. And then what is a Secure World is the most recent one that I've been reading, which is just a newsletter of various stories about cyber. And then I literally I go into Apple News and I have a category for cybersecurity, and I just click on that and look at the stories, or I have a tab in Blue Sky where that's for cybersec and infosec, and I'll look at that and I'll sort of look at the stream of stories. And then newsletters from, I'm a member of InfraGard now, so the FBI puts out bulletins on threat intel periodically, and some of it can be publicly shared and some of it is for more internal. There's a bit of a process to get into InfraGard. But those are generally the streams I look at. And then I like talking to the professionals when we meet one-on-one or when we have events, understanding from them just what are they grappling with right now in terms of system security. Citizens Bank came in and described they have a SOC, they have a team that builds threat rules for their SOC. They have an advanced security team that when they have an incident, they throw it over to them to defend against. They have threat analysts, they have risk management analysts. So they have folks working at all the levels to keep their whole bank secure. And I really like talking to those folks because you learn a lot.
Yeah.
And you get a sense of what it's like to be on the front lines.
I bet. Where is cybersecurity going in the next 5 to 10 years?
So one of the major complaints about SOCs is that it's boring and threat, and finding those alerts and knowing what to pass on can be kind of grinding. And I think automation and AI are really going to change the game in that respect if we can learn to trust it and have it be a tool and not the primary actor. I have a lot of skepticism that AI can really do the job of a cybersecurity analyst, but I certainly think it's going to be an immense tool in the toolbox for someone who is sitting there trying to read the matrix and look at all of those alerts and understand what matters and understand how to build the rules or how to build the filters. So I think where it's going is using the AI tools and using the immense amount of compute that we can harness now to try and tackle and take down some of these threat environments that are just so overwhelming and so complex and multifaceted. But I also think there's a human behavior component where we need to, as budgets shrink, as resources are limited, as federal funding becomes less certain, as even federal cybersecurity agencies become less staffed and less reliable, there's a real need for the community to pull together and seriously build out information sharing platforms. There's a lot of friction there because of legal concerns and reputational concerns, so that when hacks happen, we don't always extract the kind of threat intel we want, or if we do, it's in the hands of a private company like CrowdStrike, which treats it as their crown jewels and doesn't necessarily share. We need as a community to accelerate that information sharing, because if an attack happens to one of us, it could happen to all of us. And it's super helpful to have that, not just in an informal way, but in an automated, like, here are all the threats we collected today. We are going to send them over to you. And now they're in your database and they're in your monitoring tools. And you are as quickly as possible protected from what the front line of exploits is out there. So I think there's partly a AI technical overlay to it, and using all of this power for good. But I think there's also just a power in not letting ourselves get siloed. Here in Rhode Island, this is a common problem. 39 cities and towns, everybody's got their own little corner, and we don't share like you would expect, even though we're all sitting on top of each other. Yeah. And we're in a state the size of a dime. We need to. This is why the Institute exists, is to stitch this community together as much as possible.
Fantastic. This was great.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. It was nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you too. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks for reaching out. All right. Take care.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.